Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Passport to Possibility podcast. I'm Noelle, and this is episode 9. Last week in episode 8, we talked about not needing the whole plan before you start looking ahead. You don't have to know exactly where something is going before you allow yourself to explore it, ask questions about it, or take one step toward understanding it. But after that episode, I kept thinking about something else. What if you don't know what you want because you don't actually know all of your choices yet? I think that's a very different problem. We hear a lot about figuring out what we want. What kind of work do you want to do? What do you want the next 5 years to look like? What would you change if you could? Those are good questions, but we can only answer them based on what we already know. And there is so much that most of us simply don't know exists. There are businesses we've never heard of, careers we didn't know were careers, ways of working that weren't around when we first entered the workforce, industries we've only ever experienced as customers, skills we don't realize can be learned, opportunities we may have scrolled right past because we didn't understand what we were looking at. So maybe sometimes the question isn't, what do I want to do? Maybe it's, what don't I know about yet? I really like that question because it takes some of the pressure off. You don't have to come up with the answer to your future today. You can learn, you can look around, you can talk to people, you can ask somebody what they actually do instead of assuming you know based on their job title. You can find out about how a business works. You can learn about an industry you've never considered. And none of that means you're committing to anything. You're simply giving yourself more information than you had before. I think about this with travel all the time now. My family had been traveling for years before I understood there was an entire business side to something I had always experienced as a customer. I knew how to plan a trip for us. I knew how much research could go into finding the right hotel, figuring out where we wanted to stay, comparing options, and putting it all together. But I didn't understand the industry from the other side. I didn't know how much training was available to travel advisors. I didn't know about all of the supplier and destination education. I didn't understand how advisors earned commission on eligible travel. And one of the things I look back on now and think about is all of those family Disney trips I was already planning. I wish I had known years ago that there was another way I could have been involved in something I already enjoyed doing. That doesn't mean I would have made the same decision that I eventually made later. I have no idea. But I would have had the information. And that's the difference. There's a big difference between deciding something isn't for you and never knowing it was available to consider in the first place. I think sometimes we confuse those two things. We say, that's not for me, when we really mean is, I don't know enough about that to picture myself doing it. Those are not the same sentence. There are absolutely things I can learn about and decide I have zero interest in doing. That's fine. Learning about possibilities doesn't mean trying everything new that crosses your path. It just means not closing the door before you know what's behind it. And I think this becomes especially important as we get older because our idea of what's possible can get smaller without us even realizing it. We know what we know. We know what the types of jobs we've seen before. We know the people, the way people around us have earned money. We know how our industries work. We know what our friends and family do. Eventually, those familiar things can start looking like the entire menu. They aren't. They're just part of the menu we've already seen. I've learned about things in the last couple of years that I genuinely had no reason to know anything about before. Sometimes I find them interesting. Sometimes I think, no, definitely not for me. Sometimes I want to know more. And I think that's healthy. Curiosity doesn't require commitment. That's something I really want people to hear today. You are allowed to ask something without already knowing what you want, or you want it. You can have a conversation with someone about her business or his business without secretly signing yourself up for anything. You can attend something, you can watch a video, you can listen to somebody explain what he or she does. You can ask what something costs, how it works, what somebody actually does during the day, how long it took her or him to learn, what he or she likes about it, and what he or she doesn't like about it. And then you go home and think about it. We do this with almost everything else in life. We research vacations before we book them. We compare cars. We look at houses. We read reviews. We ask friends what they think of something they bought. But sometimes when it comes to work, business, or another way of earning income, we act as if showing curiosity means we've already made a decision. It doesn't. It means you're gathering information, and information gives you choices. I also think this is one of the reasons social media can actually be useful when it isn't just noise. Think about how many things you have learned exist because somebody happened to talk about them online. Maybe you've discovered a destination you've never heard of, a type of vacation you didn't know was possible, a product, a service, a career, a business, a way somebody organized their workday. Sometimes you see something and keep scrolling. Sometimes you stop because something makes you wonder, how does that work? I think we should pay a little more attention to that question. Not because every moment of curiosity is some sign from the universe. Sometimes you're just curious. But curiosity can show you where you have a gap in your knowledge. And once you see the gap, you can decide whether you want to fill it. That's another piece of this that I think matters too. Sometimes we assume we have to know how to do something before we're qualified to consider it. That doesn't make much sense when you really think about it. Most things we know how to do now are things we once didn't know how to do. We learn them. I'm not saying every skill is easy to learn or that everybody can do every type of work. Of course not. But I don't know how to do that, and I couldn't learn how to do that are two completely different things. That distinction matters. If you hear about something and immediately think, I wouldn't know how, maybe ask one more question. How did the people who do know how learn it? Was there training? Did somebody teach them? Did they have a mentor? Did they start with experience, or did they build that experience over time? What does somebody actually need to know before they begin, and what do they learn after they start? Those questions will tell you a lot more than looking at something unfamiliar from the outside and deciding it must not be for you. That has become a big part of how I look at possibilities now. I want information. Show me what something actually is. Show me what the work looks like. Tell me what I would have to learn. Tell me what's good about it. Tell me what's hard about it. Let me ask questions. Then I can make my own decision. And that connects directly to something I do now. When someone asks me about the travel business, I don't expect them to already understand it. Why would they? If you've never been part of the industry, there are things you simply wouldn't know. So sometimes the conversation starts with something as basic as, okay, Noelle, what exactly do you do? And I can answer that. I can explain what being a travel advisor actually involves. I can explain the training, the client side, the supplier side, and how the business works. If someone is curious about the other side of what I do, I can explain that too. They can ask questions. They can understand what they would actually be considering. And then they can decide whether they want to keep exploring it. That's where I think having someone to talk to matters. Google can give you information. Social media can introduce you to an idea. But sometimes you need an actual person who has done the thing you're wondering about. Someone you can ask, what does this really look like? That doesn't mean they make the decisions for you. It means you don't have to make the decision based on assumptions. And maybe the travel business has absolutely nothing to do with what you're curious about right now, the idea still applies. Maybe you've wondered about going back to school. Maybe you've thought about starting something completely unrelated to what you've always done. Maybe there's somewhere you want to travel, but you've convinced yourself it isn't realistic because you haven't even researched it. Maybe you've watched someone doing something online and quietly thought, I wonder how they got into that. Go find out. Ask. Research it. Talk to somebody. Your goal doesn't have to be making a decision. Your goal can simply be understanding something today that you didn't understand yesterday. That is progress. And here's something practical you can do after this episode. Think about one thing that has caught your attention recently. Not necessarily something huge, just something that made you curious. Then instead of asking yourself, should I do that? Ask yourself 3 different questions. What do I actually know about it? What am I assuming about it? And what would I need to know before I could decide whether it's worth considering? I think those 3 questions can tell you a lot, because sometimes we discover that we know far less than we thought we did. And sometimes the thing standing between us and another possibility isn't ability, it isn't age, it isn't timing. We just don't have enough information yet. I think that's a much more useful place to begin than putting pressure on yourself to come up with some grand vision for the rest of your life. You don't have to know exactly what you want 5 years from now. Maybe right now, you just need to expand what you know is available. Meet different people, learn about different things, ask more questions, pay attention when something makes you curious, and give yourself permission to learn without immediately needing to turn that information into a decision. Because you really can't choose a possibility you don't know exists. And I think sometimes everything can start looking a little different once you realize there are more choices available than the ones you could see before. If something about what I do has made you curious and you wondered what the travel business actually looks like, you can ask me. You don't have to know whether you want to do it. You don't have to come into the conversation with a decision already made. We can simply start with your questions and I can show you what it actually looks like. And if this episode made you think about something completely different than what you've been curious about, go learn about it. You might decide it isn't for you, or you might discover a possibility you never knew you had. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, and if you share it on social media, be sure to tag Mini Travel Adventures for us. That's MINI Travel Adventures, the number 4 US, so I can personally see it and hear which episodes you're enjoying. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today on the Passport to Possibility podcast. Until next time, your story isn't finished yet.